When it comes to big, evil, immoral corporations, it's hard to find any that are as bad as the National Football League. However, when it comes to portraying their actions on film, corporate interests normally end up getting in the way. The NFL broadcast their games on numerous TV stations, many of which are owned by broadcasters who also have an affiliation with movie studios. Disney, for example, have a conflict of interest in distributing a movie about the NFL because they own ESPN. Surprisingly, it's fallen to distributor Columbia Pictures, part of Sony, to make this NFL takedown movie based on the GQ expose detailing the serious mental issues affecting the NFL players thanks to the findings from Dr. Bennett Omalu. But Omalu's initial findings were discredited by the NFL, and fans of the game tried to ignore his warnings and his findings, and it would seem that the same has happened with the movie Concussion, as actor Will Smith was hoping to lead this awards hopeful to a touchdown, but instead wound up empty-handed. Is that because Concussion is too critical of a national institution, too much of a buzzkill, or is the movie just not worthy of the adoration? All biases on the table here. I don't get sports. I don't dislike sports. I don't dislike people who do like sports. I just don't get them. I don't get the spectator culture that surrounds sporting events apart from the Olympics and the World Cup, and I don't see why people get invested in whether or not a billionaire scores a point or not. However, I loathe sports as a business. It's exploitative, it benefits very few people while oppressing a vast majority, and it essentially promotes exclusion by pitting people against each other for the sake of profit. With that out of the way, I was looking forward to seeing a relatively impartial movie studio release a movie like Concussion where they could use a mainstream platform to talk about Omalu's findings and inform people. And I'm still looking forward to seeing that movie because Concussion, while highly critical of the NFL, still feels too restrained and too manufactured as an awards contender. The story itself is solid and Concussion is structured relatively well, but it's the details and the writing where it feels like Concussion is overthinking the source material. The movie opens with Omalu in court acting as a medical witness, and the first 2 minutes has him listing off his numerous qualifications. It's a funny and informative way to immediately let the audience know that Omalu knows his stuff and is someone worth listening to, but as the movie goes on, Concussion throws arbitrary roadblocks at Omalu that simply aren't needed. He has a co-worker at the coroner's office who belittles him and chastises him for caring about his deceased patients and showing them respect. Guess what? That co-worker was a creation solely for the movie. At one point, the police show up at the office and charge Omalu's boss, played by a brilliant Albert Brooks, for arbitrary petty fraud just to get at Omalu. But that also never happened in real life. The NFL discredit Omalu's work, causing a public backlash, including death threats and stalking, which did happen, but while in the movie Omalu's wife, Prima, played by Gugu Mbatha-Raw, suffers a miscarriage as a result of this stress, that never happened in real life. You have a story where a man is trying to save people's lives through science and information, but is being prevented from doing so by one of the biggest, shadiest corporations in the world for the sake of profit. You don't need to alter that story or present additional roadblocks because that base narrative is compelling enough. Does a movie need to follow history to the letter and not embellish? No, of course not, but with Concussion, it's not only unnecessary, but it also leads to an incredibly slow second half where no progression is being made because Omalu is being faced with so many hindrances that never even happened in real life. As a result, this 122-minute movie feels like 150 minutes, and the third act of the film is an absolute slog to sit through. Part of this comes from the lack of investment in Omalu and Prima's romance, Prima his wife, because Prima has no influence over the narrative and only acts as moral support. Initially, I thought it was because Prima didn't have much presence in the real events and that Concussion made her more prominent in order to give the film more of a female influence, and while I'm okay with that in principle, in the actual real-life story, Prima helped Omalu with his research and wasn't just an emotional anchor. If the creative team wanted a more prominent female influence, why didn't they just follow the actual events and make her useful to the narrative? It just makes you wonder where the movie's priorities are in regards to portraying the real-life events, because they actively distort the narrative, but also use real-life dashcam footage of an NFL star crashing his car as a result of CTE. The movie also doesn't commit to being critical of the NFL, because while there are a few scenes of the higher-ups of the company acting incredibly immoral and reprehensible, the movie does stop every so often to talk about how great the NFL is. Concussion doesn't go all the way, and while I give it props for tackling the story in the first place, place, I am disappointed that they felt the need to rein themselves in so frequently. That's not to say that Concussion is a bad movie. In fact, it has some very strong elements, particularly its cast. An actor like Will Smith may not be a great choice to cast as a lead in a biopic because his own persona and charisma would likely prevent people from seeing the character that he's portraying. However, after 5 minutes, I stopped seeing Will Smith playing Dr. Bennett Omalu and started seeing Bennett Omalu. That could be because we're seeing Will Smith appearing in less movies in recent years, so we're not as accustomed to his natural on-screen wit and charm, but in Concussion he really does hit it out of the park. His Nigerian accent is spot on, his quiet demeanour is humbling to watch, and makes it all the more effective when he does lash out in frustration, as his attempts to assist the NFL and save the lives of their players continues to fall on deaf, ignorant ears.
You know what history does to people. Trained physicians who ignore science.
Oh, wow.
Sir, I am not done. History laughs. If you continue to deny my work, the world will deny my work. But men, your men, continue to die. Their families left in ruins. Tell the truth. Tell the truth.
Albert Brooks is a great counterpoint to the serious subject matter without, strictly speaking, being comic relief. Alec Baldwin is great and gets some effective moments towards the end of the movie, and while Gugu Mbatha-Raw doesn't really get much to work with, she does well with what she has. Special credit must also be given to David Morse, Matt Willig, Richard T. Jones, and Adewale Adeoye Agbaji, probably butchered that name, for portraying real-life NFL figures who ultimately succumbed to CTE in some harrowing and effective scenes where these people are losing their minds to something the NFL would rather ignore. The movie does represent the broad strokes of the real-life event well, such as the parallels with the tobacco industry, who refuse to acknowledge research being done by people proving that cigarette smoke contributes to several diseases, and the fact that these events weren't so long ago makes the movie all the more effective. The end credits in particular do a great job at hitting home how terrible the NFL behaved, and how they still don't fully understand the gravity of their inaction. When the movie focuses on aspects like this, it's engaging, and seeing Omalu try to fight such a powerful corporate system makes him a great protagonist. It's just when the movie sidelines that to focus on fictional drama and sporadically pandering to the NFL where Concussion loses a lot of its strength. Peter Landesman, who writes and directs, does a great job working with the actors and portraying the damage that the NFL was causing to the players and their families, but some of the camera work feels a bit lax at times. Conversation sequences don't have the flair that they should, and the same goes for sequences of Omalu researching and performing his autopsies. Movies like Spotlight, Brooklyn, and The Big Short have been able to make movies almost entirely comprised of dialogue riveting, and it feels like Concussion needed that inspired touch. James Newton Howard's music is solid, and the use of actual NFL footage, as well as footage of one of the NFL players' death on a dash cam, was appropriately hard-hitting. So, after all of that, here's my conclusion. It's easy to admire the creative team for making a movie like Concussion in the first place, but it's disappointing that they restrained themselves and felt the need to contort a story that was already perfectly fascinating in the first place, including some very questionable and counterintuitive fictional inclusions. Will Smith gives a wonderful lead performance, and the rest of the cast do strong work as well, but it's a shame that this anti-NFL movie felt the need to backtrack so frequently, lest they hurt the feelings of people who knowingly ruined people's lives. It's just the principle of the thing that irks me, and holds back what should have been a must-see biopic into something relatively ho-hum and average. I give Concussion 2.5 stars out of 5.
What's happening now? What you think they're doing to you? That's nothing.
You better drop it, or they'll be doing your autopsy, Mr. Omalu.
Dr. Omalu.
Hey folks, thanks for listening to my review. You can find these reviews a day early on my website, so be sure to visit www.trilbee.com regularly, where you can find a written version. I'm just experimenting with a new format, so let me know if you like these audio reviews to complement the written ones. Your feedback is greatly appreciated. But more importantly, what do you think of the film? Be sure to let me know in the comment section below. Be sure to subscribe for more movie-related analysis. Please hit that like button, as it really helps me out, and you can support my content through Patreon for exclusive perks and rewards and updates. I'll see you folks next time.